Hi everyone, it's Chris, and I'm back today participating in the Write at Home My Sweet Petunia collaboration blog hop. And today I have made a quick tip video to show some of the techniques that I used for the cards that I created for the hop. Today I'm using the stamp sets from Write at Home. My first card is going to be using the stamp set called His Love. It is an inspirational set with scriptures and quotes, and I'm using Fabriano hot press 90-pound watercolor paper as my card bases, and I have already prepped those as a top fold. So I am going to start by stamping my greeting, which is the stamp set from His Love from Write at Home Stamps. I'm going to do all 4 of them very quickly with my MISTI. I am double stamping to get a really crisp image on the watercolor paper. This is VersaFine Black Onyx ink. I'm going to let it dry for a second, and my next step is to create a score line pattern on the bottom of the front of the card. So I've opened up the card base and I'm using just a piece of scratch paper, kind of as a guide. I want all of my lines to be pretty much the same length, about 2.5 inches from the bottom of the card, and it makes a very nice indented pattern. The lines that I am using, they're very random. Some are 1/4 inch apart, some are 5/8 of an inch. Now these lines that I'm creating, I am using to create a wood plank board type background. And the next step of my process here is to ink them up. And how I'm going to do this is I'm using a sheet of the MISTI grid pad. I love the 1/4 inch grid for lining things up. I'm going to be using some 3M Post-it tape. This is the 2-inch wide tape, and I'm using that for a mask. I'm protecting my greeting that I've stamped, and I just placed that at the top of where my lines stopped. And I'm going to be using Distress Oxide ink pads, and I am just swiping the whole ink pad from the bottom of the card up to that tape line, and I'm alternating some colors. I have antique linen, I have vintage photo, and walnut stain, and I'm kind of just layering the colors in. I want it kind of a random, very realistic, rustic wood look. And just by adding the colors and layering them with the Distress Oxide, it gives you a pretty convincing wooden fence. Now I'm going to continue with the next 4 cards. However, I'm going to switch up the colors. I want to have a little variety, a little bit more brighter colors. Oh, here's a hint. Wipe your fingers off between switching colors, or you're going to end up with some fingerprints on your card bases. You can ask me how I know that. Again, I'm just continuing on. I am going to use peacock feathers, which is my favorite color of the Distress Oxides. I want a kind of a peeling paint, very worn fence look. So I'm doing this quite light and, just random. So this was kind of fun. And the next one I did in fired brick for more of a, a redwood type deck stain look. And the last one is more of a whitewash. This is iced spruce, which is a greenish gray. And that turned out really pretty with the fence too. Now I did not wipe off my fingers in between those colors. Can you see that? There is a nice little smudge there. So, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. But I'm going to let these dry because the oxide inks take a little while to dry and I don't want to smear those. So while they are drying, I am going to create some more elements for my card. I'm going to be adding some texture and dimension to my cards by using felt. And I am going to use this dies from the stamp set, Find the Beauty from Write at Home Stamps, to create my flowers. I'm using 100% wool felt, and I am die cutting those in my Cuttlebug. And a little trick for that is to put a piece of cardstock underneath the dies. That just kind of helps cut all those little threads and felt little bits that tend to not want to let them release from the felt. I have a whole pile of them that I have cut here, and I'm going to use Zots, kind of those adhesive dots, to adhere them together and place them on my cards. And there are my completed fence cards with the little flowers peeking over the top. So my second card that I have done today is also using the set Find the Beauty. And every time I look at a stamp set, I always try to figure out something to do a little differently. So this is what I came up with for this project. I am using just the outline leaf image from the set, and I am using a plastic grid sheet. This happens to be a plastic quilter's grid that I have trimmed down to fit within my MISTI. And I am going to stamp that stamp onto that plastic grid, and I'm going to use that grid as a placement template. I can align my paper behind that template, and I will see exactly where that stamp is going to stamp. And I am going to be stamping this outline leaf image 4 times to create my own flower. So I am just using my magnet to hold my paper in place once I have it lined up. And I'm going to stamp that outline leaf image again, and then I'm going to rotate my paper again, line it up where I want that image to be stamped on my craft cardstock, hold it in place with my magnet, and stamp it again with Versa Fine Black Onyx ink. And the final quarter turn here is a little bit trickier because you want to make sure that you are getting that little wedge right into that space. But with the plastic grid sheet as a template, it's actually quite easy to do. I use this template when I use cling stamps that you can't see through. It helps me with placement a lot. So I love the idea of using this template idea. Now I'm going to add this sentiment. I'm going to use the same sentiment that I used for the first project. This is from the stamp set His Love, and I just love this one. It is just a really pretty, very encouraging sentiment, and I find myself reaching for it. So on my craft cardstock, I have stamped my new flower and the greeting. And now I'm going to add some color. Coloring on craft cardstock with Prismacolor pencils is lots of fun. And since I want my new flower to be a daisy, I am only using a white pencil. So there's really no shading. I am, just coloring a little bit darker where I think the most highlight of each of these petals would be, and leaving a little more of the craft color to peek through towards that flower center. And this is just a simple way to add some interest. I love using craft or gray cardstock with, bright colored Prismacolor pencils. I'm just gonna finish very quickly these petals. And then I am going to draw in my own stem and scribble in a little bit of grass. Just a tiny hint, just to ground my flower. I'll switch to green here, and I'm just randomly drawing in a stem, and just a little hint of grass to make it feel like it's not floating. Now I have used the die and the stamp for the center of this new daisy, and now I'm going to use the enclosed rectangle die. This is a beautiful stitched rectangle die. I cut out my panel. I cut it down. This is the smaller of the 2 rectangle dies that are included in this die set. And it has a really nice spacing for the stitching. So now I'm going to assemble my card. I am using a piece of green polka dot paper. This is from a Lawn Fawn paper 6x6 pad. And I'm just going to adhere that. I actually cut it using the larger of the two rectangle dies, and it fits just slightly inside an A2 card base. So you have just a little 1/8 of an inch border around. And then I am going to use the craft panel with foam adhesive dimensional tape. This is a 3M double-sided foam tape, and I'm going to put several strips of this on the back to give some height, a little bit of dimension to this card panel. I want to go all the way kind of across that panel just so it has some stability. And I like to line it up upside down so I just get a good feel of where the dots are going to be, so my spacing is usually a little more accurate than if I'm just trying to eyeball it. And there is my finished card. Oops, I have to add that flower center, a little liquid adhesive, and there is my finished card. So thanks everyone. Thanks for watching.